Tea is said that in British kitchen hearths there is a humble, unpretentious home-style dish. Its outer layer is a crisp, golden batter, and the filling inside is savory, tender sausage. The two combined perfectly embody the unique essence of British cuisine. 7 parts plain and simple, 3 parts oddly abrupt. It was once beloved by laborers during the Industrial Revolution, and during World War I, it became a favorite on school lunch tables. Even today, it remains a popular item in the frozen food aisles of British supermarkets. Toad in the hole. If translated with elegance and refinement, it might be called something like sausage nest in pastry, which would certainly boost its value in a fancy restaurant. But taken literally, it simply means toad in the hole. In terms of preparation, it's a dish in which whole sausages are submerged into batter and baked, then served with onion gravy and vegetables on the side, quick and hearty. As for its bizarre name, British food historians have actually offered a few more elegant explanations. But the most widely accepted version among common folk is that after baking, the batter rises unevenly, looking like the low hills and dales of the British countryside, while the sausages peeking out of it seem like toads hiding in holes with their heads sticking out. But that said, we can't laugh at the British for giving it such a far-fetched name. After all, in Beijing and Tianjin, we also have a traditional snack called toad spits honey, so it's not entirely without precedent. But unlike the soft and sweet toad spits honey, which carries a sense of leisure and delight, the origin of Britain's toad in the hole comes from the simple need of the working class to fill their stomachs during the Industrial Revolution. So from that perspective, it has a similar spirit to meatloaf, the affordable minced meat dish popular during America's Great Depression. Both arrived at the same solution by different paths. And just as meatloaf is part of Europe's tradition of minced meat dishes, toad in the hole also has an older, more prestigious ancestor. In northeastern England, there once existed a similar traditional dish, also considered a signature of British cuisine, Yorkshire pudding. Unlike the creamy dessert most people imagine when they hear the word pudding, a British Yorkshire pudding is baked from an egg and flour batter, forming a crisp shell with a completely hollow center, a rather magical kind of bread. Just as Chinese people love rice and noodles, Italians obsess over pizza, and the French adore their baguettes, Yorkshire pudding is the very soul of starch for the British. In history, this dish appeared slightly earlier than toad in the hole, around the early to mid-18th century, with similar recipes sporadically appearing in cookbooks written by famous British chefs. By the 19th century, with the rise of railroads within Britain and flourishing international trade, the price of wheat flour dropped dramatically, so Yorkshire pudding gradually became a food for common families. At first, it was only a side dish served alongside traditional roast beef. Restaurants would roast large cuts of beef over an open flame, placing a pan underneath filled with a batter of eggs and flour. As the meat cooked, hot fat dripped down into the batter, infusing it with a rich beef flavor. When the roast was done, those who could afford it bought the meat first. But for those with thinner wallets, buying the meat-soaked batter was the cheaper alternative. Still full of aroma, still incredibly delicious. And eventually, even the wealthy grew fond of this once humble snack. So this dish, originally invented for the poor, evolved into what we know today as Yorkshire pudding and continued to grow in popularity, finally becoming the essential side dish every British family eats whenever roasted meat is served. In many previous videos, we've repeatedly mentioned the British love for pies. At medieval hunting feasts among nobles, there were game pies made from deer, rabbits, and birds. At Christmas celebrations, there was the minced meat pie, a recipe brought back from the Middle East by crusaders returning from the Holy Land. On immigrant ships headed for America, there was apple pie flavored with mixed spices. And beyond that, pork pie, chicken pie, banoffee pie, and so on, there are simply too many to list. But if you wanted to divide all British pies using the simplest and crudest method, you'd get 2 major categories: sweet pies and savory pies. Within these 2 camps, there's no shortage of superstar dishes, but each excels in a different arena. Their roles on the table are clearly distinct. Sweet pies rule the world of festivals and celebrations, while savory pies more often appear in a more formal capacity on the dining table, roughly equivalent to the role of dumplings or buns in China. So in the most traditional British mindset, when someone simply says pie, they usually mean the savory kind. And if we were forced to pick a legendary duo from all savory pies, the title would go to steak and kidney pie and shepherd's pie. Among them, the well-bred gentleman, the one with impeccable lineage and noble demeanor, is without doubt steak and kidney pie. Its earliest ancestor was the meat-filled pastry served on the tables of 14th century nobles. At that time, British cooking wasn't extravagant. Chefs simply stuffed every edible part, organs included, straight into the pie. It was considered perfectly normal, but because flaky pastry hadn't been invented yet, people ate crusts that were thick and tough, similar to the heavy coffin crust of Cornish pasties, sturdy, durable, and excellent at retaining heat. By the 17th and 18th centuries, nutritious and inexpensive beef kidneys became a popular protein choice among laborers. So many taverns and inns began selling pies built around the bold flavor of kidney, with just a little beef added for texture and bite. Later, in the mid to late 19th century, as British railroads flourished, steak and kidney pie, easy to mass-produce, excellent at retaining heat, and unfazed by bumps and movement, became the darling of train dining cars. Some particularly refined diners would even phone ahead to the station to reserve a pie, so that the moment they boarded, they could enjoy a freshly baked masterpiece. Meanwhile, in the capital London, with industrialization advancing at breakneck speed, local factory workers began settling in the East End, north of the River Thames. Since these laborers, exhausted after long days of work, urgently needed a hot and affordable meal after clocking out, all kinds of pie shops, big and small, began springing up across the district. It was likely during this period that steak and kidney pie fully took shape and gained its reputation, gradually becoming a dish beloved by both the working class and the emerging middle class. There's another detail worth mentioning. Around the same time steak and kidney pie rose to fame, Britain's famous female writer and Victorian-era middle-class icon, Mrs. Isabella Beeton, published her Book of Household Management, 1859, which included the first recorded recipe for a sweat-based steak and kidney pudding made with beef and kidney. This version abandoned baking, using slow steaming instead, and eventually became a classic of British cuisine. After World War II ended and rationing restrictions were lifted, steak and kidney pie, once a superstar of the food industry, once again became a favorite in pubs and restaurants. Served with mashed potatoes and rich gravy, it formed the classic combo of Northern England, especially in Manchester and Liverpool. A legendary set meal and still iconic today. But compared to the pure-blood, orthodox heritage of steak and kidney pie, the prodigy of the British pie world, shepherd's pie, has always carried a certain odd, rebellious charm. First, its appearance. Unlike traditional British savory pies, which fully wrap the filling in pastry, shepherd's pie is a complete nonconformist, because it actually has no pastry crust at all. The filling is seasoned, minced lamb, topped with mashed potatoes, and then baked to finish. So if we're being strict, calling it a pie is technically a stretch. As for its origins, it emerged around the 18th century, not long after cheap, storable potatoes became accepted in Britain. It first appeared in rural villages, as a humble dish invented by poor farmers living in cottages to make use of leftover scraps of meat and vegetables. Back then, it was known as cottage pie. Later, as the textile industry grew, lamb became more common on British tables, so cottage pie made with minced lamb began spreading under its new name, shepherd's pie. But its cheap minced meat plus potatoes formula never changed. So during wartime rationing, with minced meat, organs, vegetables, whatever leftovers could be thrown together to make up the volume, and finally topped with a layer of mashed potatoes, shepherd's pie became the dish that housewives across the British Isles made more often than anything else. And the legacy of this era of improvised wartime cooking is that today's shepherd's pie almost doesn't have a standardized version at all. Among chefs and food writers from various countries, there are already 26 widely recognized recipes. The type of meat, the choice of ingredients, cooking procedures, all are completely inconsistent. So compared to the food itself, it represents something else. The rough, practical, frugal wisdom of the British people and the shared dining memory of generations. Like hamburgers in America or sushi in Japan, once shepherd's pie is placed on the table, it instantly fills the surroundings with a rich taste of Britain.